There's a lot of things that frustrate me when I try to explain my position of anarchy to other people. And generally, it's because that word has taken on connotations in the English language because of its misuse that have linked it to violent extremism, that have taken the concept of not having a ruler and meaning that you must therefore have chaos instead. That's not the case. It's not true in the supermarket. It's not true on the highway. It's not true in the relationships between countries around the world. Why would it have to be true in interpersonal relationships? I mean, think about this. Go to the macro first. Do you expect that tomorrow morning Canada is going to invade the United States? No. Why not? Now, if you were Canadian, you might have a good reason to suspect that the United States might invade because of past actions. Same kind of thing. Do we expect Mexico to invade? No. There are people that are talking about building up a wall, putting a fence to keep certain people out of the United States. And yeah, I'm talking about certain brown people. Generally speaking, they're not putting a ban on white Europeans coming to the United States. I know there are an awful lot of issues that I'm touching on that are kind of segues to this main issue. So I'm going to try to keep it to this issue here. The governing authority, where does it come from, and why is it that so many people feel like they have this almost mystical allegiance that they have to bow down to some human in a position of authority? Well, I think it comes from a principle in Scripture, and I'm talking to Christians primarily here because I've had a lot of Christians criticize me for advocating anarchy. And a lot of it, again, has to do with the fact that they think of anarchy through this filter of years, literally years of government propaganda saying, well, if you don't have a ruler, then you must have chaos. If you don't have someone in charge, then everyone's going to kill each other. Well, listen, Christians. In Ephesians 6, this is the letter that Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus. In chapter 6, that part when he talks about putting on the spiritual armor, you're familiar with that, right? The context of it is that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. He lays it out right in that very first sentence in that segment. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's not against people. So if our struggle is not against people, if our struggle is not against flesh and blood, what's it against? Well, he goes on. He says it is against. And you know what? Let me just read it to you here out of the New International Version. Against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God. Now, people just kind of glance over this as if somehow rulers, authorities, powers, spiritual forces, that all must be demonic and it's not going to apply to people, right? Let me read that same verse out of the King James. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I don't believe that God ever intended for man to rule over other men. When God put Adam on the earth, he didn't put a crown on Adam's head and say, here, rule over Eve. What he told Adam and Eve together was to have dominion, to rule themselves well. And if everyone were to rule themselves well, then no one would be able to argue the necessity of government at any level, would they? The problem then comes in, well, people aren't ruling themselves well. What shall we do about it? Well, what do we do on the macro? Go back to that. With the countries? Do you go and attack them? Do you go and commit violence against them? No. You simply defend yourself when they attack you. And I think that's where I'm coming down with this whole issue of, whether you're looking at the Queen of England passing on this power, this principality to her son, or whether you're talking about the rulers in the United States passing on their authority to the next set of rulers. You get what I'm saying? I think that the spiritual principle here of ruler, power, authority, principality is a demonic power structure that's designed to keep things in line. Now, where did it come from? I believe God created it, but I think he created it for something specific that is no longer being used for. When you think about what demons are in the first place, right? They're angelic beings. Angels, they're not God's children like we are. We can get really deep. But for now, let's just chew on this issue that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against rulers. And we'll leave it there for today. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to engage me more on this topic, send me an email, steve@radiofreespeech.com.